Hello, Phil. It's good to see you again.
Hi
Capital
Keith, how's it
14.
going? Yeah, here we go. That's
And
it's
and hang on, what's on your mug? It's blurred, so you have to describe it to us.
a bit blurred. It's just a sort of kind of pre-Raphaelite pattern. It's today's
Okay,
pre-Raphaelite
okay.
day. Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Oh, I've got another T-shirt on. I've got my. I was going to share this with you before we started. This is Los Fabulosos Cadillacs.
My
Uh,
God,
have you come across them?
no, but yeah, you're
Argentinian
obviously
ska band, fantastic music. Los
Argentinian.
Fabulosos Cadillacs. Vasos Vacios, fabulous song. And anyway, we're going to talk about the cognitive discourse functions again, part 2, because we got a wonderful question from a colleague, Anita Dimitrov, which was all about supporting emergent academic language. So let me read her question. To support emergent academic language and more sophisticated thinking, how can we collaborate as language teachers, L1s and CLIL, to promote agency and confidence? Will the UK trend of oracy come to CLIL? It's a very interesting question, and I think we can
Yeah.
share a lot of very useful, rich ideas with colleagues in this area.
Mm.
I mean, I don't know about you, but I feel, again, it comes back to knowing which language we're talking about and knowing and about task design and dynamic, isn't it? And
Mm.
for me, crucially, at every age level in the school curriculum, we have to have an awareness of what language is expected. You know,
Yeah.
it's no good being a subject specialist without knowing what your subject is demanding of your learners, whatever age they are,
Mhm.
and then providing for that need in some way.
Yeah.
Is
Yeah.
that it? That's the end. We can finish and go home now.
That is. That's it. That's it. Yeah. Well,
Um,
yeah, exactly. We've talked on previous podcasts about we brought in the frog, the kind of hybrid
yeah,
teacher,
yeah,
and I was going to say if I had a pound for every time a teacher or at least a language teacher said to me, understandably, they've said, Phil, I'm not paid to teach content, and I say, yes, you are. And if I had a pound for a content teacher saying to me, Phil, I'm not taught to teach language, I say, oh, yes, you are.
mm,
And so once you accept those things and
yeah,
it is true,
yeah,
then you have a different perspective on that
yeah,
teaching, and on particularly on Anita's question as well, because
yeah, yeah,
you can't divide the two things in any sense.
yeah.
I think
I, I
that's the
think
way I look
I
at it.
think I got quite excited about this topic because it took us in all sorts of directions, and you mentioned Hattie, and we mentioned AI, which we'll come to at the end. But it made me think back to stuff I used to get excited about, and one very old thing I used to get excited about, I've drawn out of the dim, lurky memory of becoming a teacher, is Marion Geddes. In the late 70s, wrote about something she called the semi-script. She talked about the best thing we can hope to do as language teachers is approach authenticity in the language classroom. It will never be totally authentic.
No.
And in helping teachers approach this authenticity, she created something called the semi-script. And the semi-script is this idea of not having a scripted lesson, of course, but having and the subject teachers always have a good idea what they're going to do in their
Yes,
lessons.
yes.
Language teachers taking on content may need to adopt a strategy of creating something like a semi-script for themselves. It might be 10 slides from a PowerPoint that they prepared, and they know what the 10 slides are, but they don't read them verbatim.
Mm.
They're able to know the route through these items of content. And I think it was magical that she created this idea, because if you think in terms of those items and the route, you repeat yourself, you hesitate, you know, there's lots of fillers in what you're saying, and that approaches authenticity. A
Mm.
little funny story about that is she once visited our project in Bulgaria, and she came with this idea of the semi-script, and we didn't have a recording studio, but she wanted us to create these audio recordings to use in classrooms. So we had this huge table with chairs stuck on it and a blanket over the top to muffle out sounds while we crawled in to do these recordings, these approaching authentic recordings to use in our language classrooms. But I think there's something there. The semi-script is a space where you can embed language. CLIL brings it a stage further because teachers will make decisions about what language to embed in those spaces. Does that make sense?
It makes a lot of sense. I like that. What's the woman's surname? Geddes, you said?
Marion Geddes. I'll share a link to the, it appeared in, I think it was in System Journal, the piece that she wrote with another colleague. And I think that thing, the semi-scripts, I keep coming back to it. It's why I got excited about this topic, because it's all about those, I mentioned a route or the PowerPoint slides, and essentially it's what we do, isn't it? We make decisions about how and where to embed which language we think the students will need.
Well, it's funny that she uses semi-script. I invented a phrase, I don't know if it's right, but I mean, we talk about scaffolds in language, no? And I invented a phrase called semi-scaffolds. In other words, when you look at scaffolding, if you look at the basic scaffolding that you employ in a classroom, you can have what I call 100% scaffolds. I've often got a warmer I do with teachers where they wander around with these scripts and they ask each other these questions. They have no idea about the answers, but they've got the answers. Call it the walkabout now. When they just read, they say, okay, what is the average age of the European male? Is it 1? 65? Is it 2? And they just read the whole thing. It's I always call that 100% scaffold. It's a script, because we know that substitution tables can be 100%, but usually a substitution table, if you give a student some discourse to use for a particular purpose, then they're often what I call semi-scaffolds. So you want to give them like sentence starters in a language class. A sentence starter is a semi-scaffold. The student is expected to complete it, as it were. So the semi-script, I guess, is like that. Students, your language development over the years is always about semi-script, isn't it? It's a nice idea. You're always filling in. You're always trying to fill in.
Unfortunately, sorry to interrupt you, I think back to my own undergraduate studies. We were expected to produce these essays in quite academic French. I did an undergraduate degree in languages and international relations, and I can remember now feeling frustrated that, okay, I see these people getting excellent grades. What language are they using that I'm not? And it was it was this selective academic phrasing, academic verb phrasing frequently, and an example I can share with you from Anglia School practice is we teach about food chains, and there's a wonderful song on YouTube, I'll put a link to it, called "There's a Hole at the Bottom of the Sea." I don't know if you've ever heard of that. You've probably, I bet Dee has, because it's such a wonderful song, and it's a song about a food chain through aquatic creatures, and we use the same to get the children repeating. And the crucial action verb is eats or feeds, depends which way you're going, And that simple sentence, X feeds Y, or Y eats X, is a really good example, I think, of how teachers can support this emergence of academic language in their children, however old they are or young they are. Just knowing that space, that semi-script here, we use toilet rolls with different sized toilet rolls, and we stick pictures of the creatures on them. And
I hope they're not. I was going to say recycled toilet rolls, but they're not.
Or cups. You can do it with cups, plastic cups too, or paper cups, because they fit inside each other. So you can represent the food chain in that way. But so that's a very good example for young learners. And the other thing is comparison. With our stories in Anglia School, the very hungry caterpillar, or Herman the worm, there's another wonderful one for you. It gets bigger and bigger, of course, because he's eating all the time. And with our children, we get them to practice measuring size changes by scrunching up tissue paper into very tight small creatures, small worms or small caterpillars, and they use little pipettes to wet the tissue, and it gradually gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And then they get their rulers out and they measure. So you've got small, smaller, smallest, and all that language is within that space, if you like. I used semi-scripts earlier, but I think there are also spaces where we can embed a lot of language.
Well, I think also it's a question of noticing, isn't it? That idea in linguistics about noticing, and you can take it. I certainly take it from a personal perspective. You know, that it's the last language you learned. Isn't it the last language I learned? It was Basque. You know, I still speak it, but
Still amazed that you
it's a hell of it was a hell of a struggle, Keith, and I'm still not, you know, really, I'm still not happy with my level. I never will be, but that's okay. But I went through certain stages with Euskera Basque, and I remember one, and it relates to what you just said. It was a bit strange for me because I was going every day to work in a Basque-speaking environment. In fact, it's not that Spanish was banned, but because the organization I was working for was part of, you know, maintaining, sustaining, and developing Basque. You know, that when I went to work to write the materials, and then I'm writing in English, but you know, I'm Basques all around me, and really I didn't want to speak Spanish because it wasn't looked down on. But of course, that was an environment where Basque was protected, and so it was up to me to speak in Basque. And I found it was okay in a social sense, you know, when you go for a coffee and stuff. But when I was in a meeting, when an academic meeting about pretty tough academic stuff, the kind of thing we're talking about now, what I found was that, you know, I have to contribute. You know, over the years, I can't just sit there quietly and I can't just say, "Can I speak in Spanish, please?" It just isn't right, you know. And so, of course, so I noticed I think goes to the heart of what we're talking about today, about stretching language. Because if you watch kids as well in class, you know, you say, "Do the kids speak?" You said, "Yeah," but they don't say very much in the average class. A kid doesn't, you know, stand up and expound for hours. You know, they don't do that. Not even in the L1 and in the L2. You know, not. But so how do we get that? How do we stretch language? And I was dissatisfied with my contributions to these meetings because I found that I was desperately sort of practicing how I would say it, and then I would just come out with something, and it'd be one sentence, you know, and then they'd be sort of going and I didn't really have the language to continue, but I analysed
lacking in sympathy.
But I analysed what it was, Keith, because I suppose because I had that meta reflection, and I realised that if I wanted to stretch the language, what I needed in Basque, and I hadn't got them, were conjunctions. Linking conjunctions, things like however, nevertheless, furthermore, that kind of stuff. And of course it's not that sophisticated language, although kids probably don't do that. But I realized that all I needed was however in Basque is alere, you know? But then you've got to know what the structure after that is. But once I've got that, once I realized it was discourse markers that I was lacking, the linking conjunctions, I cracked it, you know, and I remember that realization, and I just went and I thought, right, I'm going to practice these bloody things for the next week, and up my language level it took that little jump, you know. It was that little jump. I was very aware of that, you know, and if you're aware of that as a teacher as well with your kids, you know, you supply that kind of thing, is what you were saying, yeah? You drop that sort of stuff in and you supply that kind of thing within a task, within task design.
So. I mean, you mentioned something I recognize as a question loop early in our discussion today, where your colleagues are walking around asking questions, and somebody will provide them with an answer. I think those examples are really excellent things to share with colleagues because, you know, conjunctions, as you've just mentioned, would be a great little card game where the students are studying something that needs two items to be joined by one of these words, and they've got a lot of them, and they try them out while they're reading something or sharing something.
I wrote an activity exactly like that, Keith. It was exactly like that, but it was within the framework of content. You know, that I knew that we were going to sit them down at a certain stage of the unit after about 3 weeks, and they were going to have quite a complex discussion in their third language. And so
Yeah.
before they did that, it's amazing you say that, we prepared them with this card game that had conjunctions, and it was from my own experience.
Yeah.
And we were chucking in the conjunctions within the content. That's the next thing. I think that's what we've got to be careful about here as well. Now, I would never encourage a language teacher, to go in and say, "Hey,
we're lesson on conjunctions today."
That's right. Yeah, that's it. That's right. This week we're gonna do linking conjunctions and subordinate. We might look at subordinate
again.
Yeah, bloody hell, teacher. Whereas if you chuck those conjunctions in the flow of a unit, because
Absolutely.
you know that the next activity is quite complex and it's going to require them, then why not do it? Why do we have to have this kind of linear progression? Let me
mention a book, Phil, because I found extremely valuable books of collections of activities like this that I kind of then rip and adapt with content in mind. And Peter Watcyn-Jones is a prolific writer of collections of these language activity types. And they're frequently photocopyable A4 size sheets of ideas like this that can then be populated very easily with content in mind, that vocabulary, creative grammar activities. I'll put a link as well to him in our notes, because taboo games, games where you want children to talk around a vocabulary item. It's a great way for getting them exploring, if you like, the nearby academic language, but not mentioning a vocabulary item. Even playing taboo, focusing on, well, how would you describe this thing? Like you mentioned, definition language with a syringe, I think, in a previous discussion.
Yes.
So collections of taboo games that you can just pull out of a shoebox, for example. Okay, we're doing global warming this week. What's the essential vocabulary? And we also need cause-effect language. So the children can practice the subject-specific terminology from the theme, but also get to grips with cause-effect language at the same time. I think, that those collections of activities are part of everything we do, aren't they? And teachers need to collect them.
Watcyn-Jones, genius. I've got loads of his books, absolutely brilliant. And sometimes you just open it at page 3 and think, "Wow, I like that." I think it was his ability also to he had a great ability to design a particular procedure. Really good, really good. I mean,
he's probably very tuned in to the dynamic of how things happen in the classroom social environment, and puts that into activity.
Yes, that's very good. That's very good. That's absolutely right. Yeah, that's what he was brilliant at. I guess his stuff must be online as well now. I don't know. They're quite old.
Maybe. I mean, the other things to mention, I think, like that, because you mentioned the get up and walk around and find an answer. It might be, I think there's another one of his that's 3 things you know and 3 things you want to find out. So I've got a blueprint for that activity. I can share that as well with everybody, where you've got 6 cards on a sheet, and card number 1 has 3 questions, and the answer to those 3 questions are somewhere else on the other cards on the sheet.
Yeah, I've seen you.
So it means you have to speak to at least 3 people in the room.
Yeah.
If you're very lucky, you get your 3 answers quickly. But all the mingling that's going to happen is that get up and walk around and find someone who knows. Well, I'll share that blueprint, because then you can put your own content questions and answers in there, up to 18.
I think that will be great for a subject teacher. Language teachers know that. Find someone who it's an old chestnut, isn't it? But just transferring that into a subject class with subject content, that becomes powerful, doesn't it?
I think so.
That sort of procedural trick. I'm interested in this this idea, though. I think if language teachers, are listening, I think that I'm interested in this idea of we've said before about stretch and deepen, no? Because the problem, I think one of the problems with language teaching is that, well, not problems, but the difference between language and subject teaching is you never hear a subject teacher say, right, today we're going to look at, a language teacher says, today we're going to learn about, today,
Yeah.
Whereas a subject teacher will say, for the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at demography or something, no? Because subject teachers tend to think, I've said before, they tend to think in sequences. They tend to think in stretched, stretched distances, as it were, of content.
Yeah.
Whereas language teachers don't think like that because they're probably restricted. They might be limited to teaching a textbook in their school, and that textbook is fine, for language learning purposes, but the content is not stretched. It's stretched over about 3 pages, and then you start another chapter and then another chapter. So you never get this development of the content. And I would say that that's what CLIL is. CLIL is stretching content. So if you want to import more content into your classes, and you want kids to benefit from that linguistically, that's your objective, language teacher, then the benefit is going to be that the language is going to get more complex, more interesting and richer the further along that line you go.
I think so too.
When you're training subject teachers in CLIL, of course, you say that to them as well. You say, look, at those initial stages, the calc, the academic language, isn't going to be that prominent. You're not going to overdo it at that stage. But later on, of course, you can expect to see it. You can expect to assess it. And
I think the point I wanted to contribute while listening to you say these things there was related to how rich the language can be in school textbooks, almost in a way that ignores the language level of the learners. And in writing Macmillan's Vocabulary Practice Series for science and geography, they gave me loads of secondary curriculum textbooks for geography and science. And I trawled through them looking for examples of general academic language. We talked about cause-effect language. Within one textbook, I found as many as 20 different verb phrases for describing X causes Y. Some of them were noun structured. Some of them were kind of lexical verbs like trigger. You can't really understand it unless you learn it as a lexical item. And I think in a way, what we are talking about is teachers need to decide how much of all of that they want their students to produce in their output. And that's a strategic question, isn't it? You might have a very extremely rich textbook. I would argue, just for readability reasons, tone them down a little bit to the right level of input content.
I see it in a slightly different way, Keith. I see that decision as being determined by what you're going to do at the end. And I think, again, the problem with the standard textbook is you don't necessarily do anything at the end. You just say, hey, we've looked at and then let's move on to relative clauses, whatever it is. That's a bit crude, but obviously each chapter of a language textbook has a linguistic objective, and that linguistic objective might be underlying or it might be explicit, but that's the point. That's the point, really. There's not a.
They've learned the past perfect, for example.
Yes, they've learned the past perfect, and they've used a history text maybe, and that's fine, But there's no, as it were, there's no culmination. There might be a little activity, a little task at the end, but there's nothing that's substantial. But I go back to my point, when you stretch content and you make it more significant in your classroom, and you say, right, for the next 3 weeks, we're going to do this in our English classes. And at the end of those 3 weeks, we're going to do X. Now, then the reason for that language, as you say, becomes more significant. So the decisions that a teacher makes will be determined by the end product, not necessarily. That it becomes much easier to plan it. I've just got behind me here. I've got the unit that I wrote about. We call it Life Between Buildings, and it was for 16-year-olds here. And what they had to do, it was over like a couple of months in their English classes. they had to find a space in their particular locale, in their neighborhoods, in their towns, and they had to do it in pairs or in small groups. At the weekends they had to do it and they bring this back to the class. They had to find a space that wasn't being used for its proper purposes, or it was a defective space, let's say. And of course the whole unit was talking about life between buildings, about urban spaces between buildings, and what happens to them. It's an interesting concept.
Yeah.
That's what the unit's about. But the end task is they have to find their own space, they have to present their own space, they have to justify their own space. Now, I've just got behind me, I've got the what I mean by stretching content for a language teacher. So this is what they have to do at the end of a couple of months of studying about. It sounds a weird idea, and it's not 3 pages of a textbook. It's a couple of months.
Right.
Right. What do they have to do? They have to name the project, their project of their space. They have to name the project space. They have to describe its location. They're going to do that probably visually, and also they've got to describe it. They've got to talk about the function of the new space.
Okay.
4, they've got to justify why they chose the space. 5, now, if you're a language teacher, all you have to do is think what language is required here. 5, they have to present the model of their new space, which they will have done digitally, but they've got to present it, they've got to talk about it. 6, they've got to describe this model. 7, they've got to talk about the cost. How much is it? We give them a limit of €25,000 so they don't do something stupid, But the cost of the model, they've got to justify their budget. Look again, new discourse. No? Number 8, they've got to end the presentation as well. They've got to end the presentation, they've got to conclude, and they've got to resolve it. So all those 8 points there require certain language frameworks that any language teacher can identify. But unless you bring that sort of challenge into your classroom, then you're not going to get that language. But the language arises naturally from that. We were just, I was talking 10 minutes ago about discourse markers. Well, right at the end of this unit, just before they present, the teachers are given the whole linguistic landscape of the last 2 months of this unit. And one of them, they have to do it. I've got it. It says the kids have to fill in the gaps, basically, of each different language type that they're going to have to use the next week for this presentation. And it says, with regard to tolerance, my town is really good. As for the urban design in my city, I was talking about climate, referring to safety, so different registers there. But those are all discourse markers. They are going to need certain discourse markers at certain points of their presentation, and we know that. So that's a reason. It's a reason for learning those, because of the formality of the presentation.
Another collection to think about sharing. Listening to you talk about stretching content like that is I did 2 weeks at the Bell Foundation in Cambridge one summer with a bunch of CLIL teachers from around Europe, and to bring us all together on the same page, we came up with the idea of global warming across the curriculum. And the geographer, the historian, the technology, the English teacher, and so on, they all had to create a place for themselves within that materials writing workshop that I got them to do in the afternoons. We did CLIL sort of principles and practice in the morning and materials writing in the afternoon. And we created a whole collection of joined up lessons to do with global warming relevant to different parts of the curriculum. And all of these activity types that you and I are talking about for supporting the academic language within their subject areas are all in there. There's card sorting activities where, you've got alternative energies, pros and cons, which creates a tree when they talk about these pros and cons, advantages, disadvantages. There's paired speaking activities, filling in the gaps while they work with another person, watching a video, annotating an image. That's the semi-script that they annotate while they watch the videos, listen to something simple. And I think, the more that colleagues can actually look at that big picture
Yeah,
think about where language fits within that
yeah,
stretch, as you call it, rightly,
that's it.
Phil. I think
That's it.
the healthier the CLIL will be
Yeah.
for the learners.
And it's dead easy for language teachers to see it. I'm just looking at other ones. Relative clauses. You cannot avoid relative clauses if you're
Yeah,
talking about a space. You say
yeah,
this is a space that we found. This is a space that is used for. You can't avoid relative clauses. So at the end of the unit, you just make relative clauses salient
yeah, yeah, yeah,
before
absolutely.
they do their presentation. You just make all these things salient. There's
And I
loads of
think
stuff.
in a way, largely that focus on
Preposition.
language can be missing um, from subject teaching experiences for learners.
Well, it can be missing from language teaching as well, Keith. I
Yeah,
mean,
no, no,
how many language teachers over the centuries, over the decades, sorry, have said it's impossible to teach prepositions? Is it preposition? And it is. It's very difficult to teach English prepositions. It's very difficult, and in the end, people give up. It's like die das der in German. No? People
yeah,
give up and they say, well, in the end, we can surround them with prepositions, but in the end, they've got to know if it's in or if it's on. And there's no point. There's
yeah.
no point trying to explain that because it's just impossible.
But
I mean,
that point I wanted to make right there is it's all about where you embed this language, isn't it?
well,
And
that's it. If you're going to talk about in the spaces, if you're going to describe the urban spaces and you're going to describe where you're going to put things and how you're going to make your new space, you cannot avoid prepositions. And prepositions will come in there. And so
exactly,
when the
exactly.
kids are practicing their presentation because they're going to be assessed by their peers,
Yeah.
then the prepositions might not seem important, but if you get them right, it makes it sound good. And if you get them wrong, okay, it's not a problem for comprehension, but
Yeah.
it doesn't sound that
But
good. And so
it's
it's a
your end
perfect.
product that pulls everything along, really.
That's it, Keith. That's it. That's it. That's
Presentation,
it.
most of
But
all.
that's because going back to not to be boring, but that's because you've stretched the content.
Yeah, yeah.
That seems to me to be the key. Obviously, I know that language teachers can't stretch content like that if they're teaching in academies and things, but I think they can think about stretching it a bit more and
But
then
I
seeing what
think
the implications are. No?
I think we may even have material for cognitive discourse functions number 3. If you feel that I mean, we sort of subtitled it Emergent Academic Language today to deal
Mm,
with Anita's question.
mm.
But I feel like there's a whole lot more we can share about these task designs and get up and mill around type activities and auditing language. And we still haven't talked about AI, which we've run
No,
out of time.
no,
So
no, no. No. Keith, I've got a new idea for these podcasts. I think we should both end with a concluding remark. Because
yeah,
it's pretty spontaneous today. My concluding remark, you can think about yours while I make mine, since I've just challenged you there. But
go on then.
my concluding remark would be go all the way back to 1975, as we say, and the famous Bullock report, no? The famous Bullock report about language across the curriculum. And the big thing that everybody knows, all teachers know about this, is that Bullock said, all teachers are language teachers.
Yeah,
And that was, and what he meant was that all, as we've been saying, all subject teachers are also responsible for language in the curriculum. Yeah? And of course he scared people,
yeah.
but by that phrase. And, so subject teachers would say, I'm not a language teacher. All he meant was what we said about making language set in. And this thing about all teachers are language teachers has gone through the decades. But I'd like to just twist Bullock a little bit as my
Go ahead.
concluding remark. And I would say that all teachers are content teachers. Yeah. Is that a fair resolution for my little bit? I think that
Yeah,
all teachers are
yeah,
content teachers, and if language teachers can take
yeah,
that on, then they
yeah.
start to see, as you said,
I mean, I
where,
think
where language comes from.
the theme that you've really invited us to take on and discuss in the future is going to be content for language teachers, isn't it?
Yeah,
I
that's
don't
it.
think we've
Yeah,
talked about that yet.
yeah.
We talked about what each can get from each other, but I think really great ideas for language teachers to get their teeth into substantial content and be able to teach English at the same time. I think it's
And the implications of that for the language, how that impacts on the language of the lessons. Yeah, sorry.
well. Mike, I'm not going to make a large statement, but I would remind everybody of the idea of the semi-script, because for me it was a pivotal moment in how I organise
Yeah,
my teaching and learning, and I'm
I
still
like that.
thinking about these these spaces where ideas are organised and how we use them. Let's stop there, Phil. We've gone
Great.
over time a little bit.
Great.